Welcome and thank you for joining the College of Education Spring 2019 Student Teaching Orientation. My name is Julianne Brett and I'm the Director of Clinical Practice here in the College of Education at Grand Canyon University. And before we get started today, I just wanted to touch base on a few points about the webinar. First, all attendees have been muted at this time to reduce any background noise. Please know that there will be an opportunity for questions at the end of today's webinar. Once we get there, you can certainly raise your virtual hand or type a question into that question box, and we will certainly try to get to you. We will also be sending out a follow-up email with a copy of the recorded version of today's webinar, either later today, probably tomorrow, to all attendees, so you'll have the recorded version as well. And then just before we get started, if I can have everyone raise their virtual hand and indicate if you can hear me all right, that would be great. Okay, great. Looks like we have lots of hands raised. So we'll go ahead and get started. Again, I want to congratulate you as you transition into this final phase of your degree. And as you get ready to start this final leg of the journey, please do be reminded that GCU is dedicated to helping support you through this process and in promoting a positive and productive student teaching experience for each and every one of you. So here you'll see the topics that we'll go over during today's webinar. We'll touch on a little bit about who we are and what we believe, the student teaching experience. We'll show you our expectation and our support resources. We'll introduce the Professional Learning Network, touch on the Exemplary Teacher Candidate Award, and go over the COE Promise. We do understand that we will be covering a considerable amount of information in a very short time. So as a reminder, we will be again sending you a copy of this presentation. You'll receive a link to this student teaching orientation module. It is a self-paced module that you can click into any time and go back to any of the sections that we're covering before your student teaching, during, or even after your student teaching for some resources if you so choose. So here on this first page, you'll see the College of Education's conceptual framework. And our conceptual framework is really based on three primary principles: learning, leading, and serving. The learning refers to everything that you've learned throughout your program of study. For example, these would be your lectures, your reading, your assignments. It's really all that knowledge and skills that you've gained throughout the program in order to help you become that effective educator. The leading is what we hope all of our candidates are doing while you're working out there in the field. You're leading by example and you're representing us here at GCU well. The serving component is based on our rich Christian heritage. And we truly feel that teaching and education is a service-oriented profession and that we're all called to serve the broader educational community. And again, you'll have an opportunity to go through and click through each of these pages as soon as we send you the link as well. So here you'll see the College of Education's pledge. Let me just scroll down a little bit. And really this is, again, in keeping with our Christian heritage. In the College of Education, we find our purpose and our calling in teaching. We seek to lead others to their God-given potential. And within the COE pledge, we affirm to commit to the following actions. You enter the class as a professional educator, fully prepared every day. You maximize the learning for all students. You approach teaching and learning for all students with the heart of a servant leader. You're a culturally responsive educator, engaging with and advocating for social justice. You model personal integrity, professional ethics, collaboration, and excellence for all. And last but not least, you're a lifelong learner and you're committed to become that professional educator role. So it's important to point out that the quality teacher education programs really can't exist without also the cooperation of our partnerships with the schools and the school districts. We know that successful teaching and successful teacher preparation requires teamwork, cooperation, and hard work from all parties involved. This includes you as the student teacher, any school administrators, the cooperating or mentor teacher, our university faculty supervisors, and certainly any other school personnel that you'll be interacting with. So here you'll see a list of some of the important roles during the student teaching experience. First, we'll start with your teacher placement counselor. Each of you have been assigned a teacher placement counselor, or what we refer to often as TPC. You'll notice here in the College of Education, we have acronyms for just about everything. So the TPC is the person who works to secure your student teaching placement. This is the person you can go to for any questions regarding the start dates of your placement, the start dates of your course, or any of the time requirements. Any general questions related to the overall student teaching experience can be directed to your teacher placement counselor. Your field experience counselor, who you should all be familiar with, can also certainly help out. You'll also each be assigned to a cooperating teacher or a mentor teacher. This is the person in whose classroom you'll be spending your time on a daily basis. And again, you'll hear the cooperating teacher often referred to as the CT. And the cooperating teacher, or CT, is really going to be your primary go-to for questions, guidance, feedback, and support through the entire student teaching experience. Some of you may still be waiting to hear back on your confirmed placement. Oftentimes, our teacher placement counselors are just waiting, they send over your request and we're just waiting to hear back from the school site. So in the case you may not know yet who your cooperating teacher is, as soon as we receive that information, we will certainly forward that to you. Each of you will also be assigned to a GCU faculty supervisor. This is a faculty member here at GCU who will be evaluating your teaching performance a total of 4 times throughout the semester. And we'll talk about that whole evaluation process here in a bit. You'll also be assigned to a course instructor. This course instructor is the person who will be facilitating that online student teaching course. This instructor is like any other previous instructor that you've had. They'll respond to discussion questions, they'll grade your assignments, and they'll provide you with your overall score for that student teaching online course. And then finally, we have the Office of Clinical Practice. This is the department that works directly with your cooperating teacher, or your mentor teacher, who you'll be working with on a daily basis. And your cooperating teacher will be receiving communication from the university several times throughout the experience. We'll provide them with a training, resources. We'll address any questions they have throughout the student teaching time. So this is also the department that works with our GCU faculty supervisors. Okay, first and foremost, it's important that you review the Student Teaching Handbook. The handbook can be found on the Student Success Center. And again, once you have the link to this module, you'll be able to click right here, and that will directly take you to the Student Success Center. You can also get there through your classroom. So please keep in mind to review the handbook that aligns directly with your program of study. If you're not sure exactly which handbook to use, please feel free to reach out to that field experience counselor or teacher placement counselor, and they can point you to the right spot. It is important to review the handbook in its entirety, as it does outline all of the policies and the procedures expected of our student teachers. You will be expected to adhere to each of those. And again, here in a little bit, we'll be reviewing a few of those policies and expectations a bit in further depth. But again, the handbooks along with several other student teaching resources, can be found on the Student Success Center. And here's just a screenshot of what that looks like. You'll just go to the left-hand side, click on the student teaching section, and the resources are here on the right. Again, as I mentioned, each of you will be enrolled in an online student teaching course. The dates of your online course should align as closely as possible to the dates that you start out there in the field. You'll see the overall requirements of the course listed here. You'll have the weekly discussion questions and participation. There is just one discussion question per week for this student teaching course. You'll have the student teaching evaluation of performance, or again, what we refer to as an acronym, the STEP. The STEP is essentially a work sample where you'll demonstrate your ability to plan, deliver, and assess a standards-based instructional sequence. You'll analyze student learning, and you'll reflect on your instruction and the student learning in order to improve your teaching practice. You'll have an online portfolio. Each teacher candidate will create their own online digital portfolio, and the syllabus will inform you to exactly what components you should be including into that portfolio. There are also 2 video assignments. One video will show you implementing an activity from your unit plan, and then the second video is a reflection on your personal teaching philosophy. The course does also include those 4 clinical practice evaluations, as well as the documentation of your required days. Please do keep in mind that teacher candidates should not be completing their online course assignments at the school site. All of your coursework should be completed outside of your school day. Those hours at the school site should really be focused on the classroom students. Now we'll transition and we'll take some time to talk about your specific responsibilities as a teacher candidate within the student teaching experience. So once you begin your placement, you're going to be responsible for several things. A few of them here are listed. Number 1, you'll want to make sure that you're communicating with your cooperating teacher. You'll want to remember that relationship that you build with him or her is going to be critical. You want to make sure that you're asking questions, you're requesting their feedback. They really are the expert out there in the field, so certainly do take this time to use them as that valuable resource. You will also observe and shadow their skills. You'll want to understand and follow any of the related ethical standards. So you'll want to make sure as soon as you meet with your cooperating teacher to ask them about their school site policies. Make sure you're familiar with those and adhering to those as well as the GCU policies. And finally, you'll want to take full responsibility of the classroom for the minimum required weeks. This is what we call that full takeover time frame, where you're essentially responsible for everything in the classroom. And remember, the more time that you can have in that full takeover mode, the better prepared you're going to be for your own classroom. So all of this really includes a readiness to accept responsibility. Each of you will come with a little bit of a different background, a different learning curve, and it's expected that you draw on all of that previous experience, the previous coursework, and you're able to apply the theories and that content knowledge that you've gained from your program and implement it and develop your own personal teaching style. It's also expected that you make contact with your GCU faculty supervisor and that you're meeting with them regularly. Again, they'll be meeting with you a minimum of 4 times to observe your teaching performance and complete evaluations. You'll want to make sure that you have a kind of a midpoint in the middle of your experience session with them, really a formal discussion about your progress. And then you also want to make sure you have that final evaluation towards the end of your experience where you make sure that all of your required days have been met. This is also a good time to talk about all of the learning that has taken place up until that point. And be sure that you're also maintaining all of the responsibilities of your online coursework, including that participation and discussion as appropriate. Those points might not seem like a lot, but it can add up. And we just want to make sure that you do well in that online course, as well as the in the field experience, so you can successfully get through everything and graduate. So again, make sure that you're doing well in the experience as well as the online classroom. Don't forget to upload any of the assignments in the appropriate space in LoudCloud. You also want to remember that this experience is really essentially a semester-long job interview. So it does certainly start with that first impression. You want to make sure that you're purposeful when you introduce yourself to key people. That's not only on the campus that you're at, but also within the entirety of the district. So you want to be thoughtful and think through how you plan to introduce yourself to your cooperating teacher. So as soon as you do receive that cooperating teacher's contact information, please feel free to initiate contact. Remember that you're a guest in their classroom, and first and foremost, always thank them for opening up the classroom to you. You'll also want to think about how you plan to introduce yourself to that GCU faculty supervisor. And again, this is the adjunct faculty member who's responsible for observing and evaluating you. And most often, I would say student teachers are in communication with their GCU faculty supervisor once a week. And that's not necessarily in person once a week, but typically either via phone or email. They're just staying in pretty regular communication with them and letting them know how the experience is going week by week. You'll also want to consider how you plan to introduce yourself to your students in the class as well as their parents. You know, think about, will you put an email together to introduce yourself, maybe a newsletter? You might want to contact them by phone. Just make sure that you're collaborating with your cooperating teacher and you're determining the best course of action and how to introduce yourself to those parents. You'll also want to take the time to think about how you plan to introduce yourself to the grade level team or your department. And certainly, really the heart of the school, the service staff and the office secretary, as well as any principals or administrators on campus. And again, remember your cooperating teacher, or again, who we refer to as the CT, is going to be your main support at the placement site. Along with reviewing GCU policies, again, you'll want to make sure that you're reviewing any of those district or school site policies, and then any of the, the classroom policies or rules and expectations that that cooperating teacher may have in place. Again, this could include the school policies regarding their philosophy, going over the calendar, any scheduled events, the expectations regarding dress or behavior, how they keep their records, how they grade, what their disciplinary procedures are. You'll certainly want to talk about their curriculum and the content to be covered, what materials they use, any state, district, and grade level standards, the scope and sequence. So just make sure up front you have a nice conversation with your cooperating teacher or your mentor teacher and discuss all of the expectations. Okay, so let's go ahead now and break down what a typical day looks like for a student teacher. You'll want to make sure that you're following that cooperating teacher's timetable. So you're going to be expected to follow the contracted work hours of a regular teacher. So that means participating in any of their morning activities as well as any of those contracted after-school duties as well. You'll utilize your prep periods for planning, reflection, and lesson planning. Again, the prep periods really aren't meant for you to work on your online classwork. That should be only for after school. And certainly you will want to carve out some time to talk with your cooperating teacher to discuss your progress, ask questions, and plan. So here, you'll see the way we break down our classroom days. They can include student contact time, and this really is any of that instructional classroom time that you're working directly with the students, and teacher contract time. So that's any function at the cooperating school site that the teacher is contracted to be there for. So that, again, does include those prep times and any professional development times. What cannot be counted towards your required days are district holidays or inclement weather days. So if you do have off for a holiday, or if the weather is not working out so well, you can't count those towards your student teaching. You'll just have to tack on some days at the end. Let me scroll down here a little bit. So when you begin your student teaching experience, you're going to want to sit down again with your cooperating teacher and maybe have a district calendar there with you, and you're going to want to count out your required days. Now, depending on your program, that will either be a 70 or 75-day requirement. So you'll want to count out those days and come up with a tentative end date. The expectation for attendance is that every student does attend the school for the full day. We do understand that sometimes life does happen, so if you do need to be absent, you want to make sure that you're communicating with both your cooperating teacher as well as the supervisor as soon as possible. So you also want to make sure that you prepare any substitute plans if you are missing the day that you were planned to teach. And of course, again, any days that are missed will need to be made up in order to fulfill that minimum requirement, whether it's 70 or 75 days. So here you'll see we have dual placement and then 2 different single placements. This again is just dependent on your program. The single placement is when you're going to be working in one classroom for the entire experience. So depending if you're in one of our older programs versus a new program, that could be a 15 or 16-week requirement. Most of you are going to be in programs that require 75 days over 16 weeks. However, if you're in ELM 490 or ELM 590, SEC 490 or 590, or SBD 590, it's going to be a 15-week requirement at 70 days. Again, that can be a little bit confusing, so if you're not sure, feel free to reach out to your field experience counselor, your teacher placement counselor, and they can inform you of the correct required days. If you're in one of our dual placement programs, you'll be spending time in 2 separate classrooms. So those programs that have dual placements are our elementary and special education program, our early childhood program at both the undergrad and grad level, and then we also do have a newer program. It's our early childhood and early childhood special education program. Each of those programs do require 2 separate placements. So you'll have a Session A placement and a Session B placement. Session A requires 35 to 40 days. Session B requires the same 35 to 40 days for a total of 75 days over 16 weeks. So here you will see, and I won't click into them for the sake of time, but here you'll see a suggested timeline. Just know that they are here. They are also within the manuals. This goes over the tentative full takeover timeline, the suggested full takeover timeline. And again, we think of that full takeover, the student teaching experience, we think of it as a phasing in, and then a full takeover and a phasing out. So really the first few weeks are designed to become acclimated to the classroom community. You'll start to teach a section or a subject at a time. Then you'll begin taking on that full teaching responsibility when you're responsible for all the transitions, all the planning, all the assessments, all the grading, and the implementation of the lessons. Again, the more time you can get in that full takeover time frame, the better prepared you're going to be. Our teacher candidates here at GCU are required to have a 50% full takeover experience. So, if you're in the 16-week placement, that would mean really like about an 8-week takeover. So again, you'll phase in, you'll have that full takeover, and then towards the end of the experience, you're going to start to give that responsibility back to your cooperating teacher. You'll transition out of that full-time role. Maybe within the last week or so, you'll consider observing other classroom teachers to see other teaching styles and management techniques. So again, I highly suggest you looking at these suggested schedules for your particular program, and you'll have access to this module as well as the manuals where you can locate these. Okay, you will document your required time or your days using our clinical practice time log. This is going to be a daily process for you, and you're expected to document every day that you complete. You'll also document any makeup days if you need to have them, and you'll obtain your cooperating teacher's initials at the end of each week. So again, you're going to be documenting each day you complete. The cooperating teacher's role is to initial at the end of each week and then sign at the end of the experience. And here is an example of what the time log looks like. Your faculty supervisor is going to be reviewing the time card at each of the 4 observations to just make sure that you're on track. They will collect the time card at the end of each session. So if you're in a dual program, they'll collect it at the end of the first session and again at the end of the second. And then they're going to verify the completion of all required days, whether that's 70 days or 75 days. They won't actually submit your final evaluation until they can sign off and make sure you've completed all of your required days. So again, this is just an example. The copy of the blank time log is located on the Student Success Center. So this is what a 16-week time log will look like. And then we have a separate 8-week session one as well. So now we'll go into the clinical practice expectations and academic standards. All College of Education candidates, whether they're in a student teaching program or an advanced program, they're all held to the same academic standards and conduct expectations for observing and practicing in any field experience. So these can be found in our University Policy Handbook as well as the Student Teaching Handbooks. So students are expected to read through these and be familiar with them and make sure that they're adhering to all expectations. Again, for the sake of time, we won't read through each of these, but you should be making sure that you review these, you understand them, and you acknowledge what is expected of you as a student teacher. In addition to following our specific procedures for GCU, as well as those at the school site, all College of Education candidates are also held to our professional dispositions. You'll see the 10 listed here. These also can be found on the University Policy Handbook or within our manuals. These professional dispositions you should be familiar with as we do embed them throughout your program. And again, these are our expectations for professionalism. So things like, are you committed to the profession? Do you show up on time? Are you communicating well and professionally with others? Do you show respect for others, including the students? So again, these are the standards that we will be evaluating you on. your first clinical practice evaluation, this is what you get evaluated on. So again, we won't take the time to read through each one of these, but please do review these prior to the student teaching start. Here at GCU, we've also adopted the Model Code of Ethics, and these are standards put forth by the National Association of State Directors of Teacher Education and Certification. They follow 5 primary principles. So again, we won't take the time to click through this for the sake of time, but please make sure that you are clicking into the Model Code of Ethics for Educators and you're becoming familiar with those 5 principles. Particularly Principle 5, which is the responsible and ethical use of technology. And these are those standards for ethics that sometimes we as teachers don't always think about. So it's important to review what it looks like and what's appropriate in terms of ethics when you're working with students in the classroom, you know, on your personal social media. You just want to make sure that everything is private. Students do and will look you up. And we just want to make sure that we're held to high standards. Something more recent that we have put into draft here is our essential elements for teachers. These are really the key pieces or those key characteristics that one needs to possess in order to be a successful educator in today's classroom. Again, we won't look through each of these, but certainly do read through these and just make sure you are able to meet these essential elements. If you have any questions about these, please feel free to reach out to your counselors and we'll certainly get you as much information as we can. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and talk about what the observations and the evaluations consist of. As I had mentioned previously, each of you will be evaluated on your teaching performance a total of 4 times throughout the entire experience. You'll be expected to put a lesson plan together for each of these observations. And the lessons can really vary just depending on your grade level or the content. Typically, they're going to be anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, sometimes even up to an hour. You'll provide your GCU faculty supervisor with a lesson plan ahead of time. And it's also recommended that you have a discussion before the observation with your GCU faculty supervisor, just so they know what they're going to come in and observe. And then you'll have an opportunity to ask questions with your supervisor or the cooperating teacher, prior to the observation and evaluation occurring. And then after the observation occurs, you'll have what we call a post-conference. And these are designed to be collaborative with your supervisor and your cooperating teacher. So you, your supervisor, and your cooperating teacher should sit down, have a conversation after the observation, and review how things went. So you'll discuss how it went, maybe come up with some ideas on how you could have implemented the lesson better, what you did well, how did the students respond. And then after that post-conference, that's when the GCU faculty supervisor will complete the clinical practice evaluation. The completed version will be provided to you via the student portal. So it is an electronic document that you'll get to your student portal. And then you'll take a copy of that completed PDF and you'll upload it to your LoudCloud classroom. And again, there are 4 evaluations. Here we broke down each of the 4. For those of you that are working in the dual placements, the 2 different classrooms, the supervisors will complete 2 observations in the first classroom and then 2 in the second classroom. The first, again, will be on those professional dispositions. The second and third observations are aligned to the INTASC teaching standards. And these really focus more on your ability to teach, your ability to plan appropriately, your ability to collaborate with your colleagues and design diverse lesson plans and assessments. So for evaluation number 2 and 3, these are again really focusing on those primary teaching skills. And then the fourth evaluation, that's when it includes everything. It's a summative evaluation of your professionalism, those professional teaching standards, and then lastly, the content standards, or the SPA, Specialized Professional Association Standards, and that depends on your discipline. So if you're a secondary science teacher, on that fourth evaluation, you're going to be evaluated also on your science content standards. Or if you're an early childhood major, that's when you'll get evaluated on those early childhood specific standards. Okay, we also wanted to make sure we took some time to introduce to you the clinical practice scoring evaluation, or the rubric. This is the same scoring guide that will be utilized for each standard on each of the 4 evaluations. So you'll notice here at the top the different performance indicators. They go from no evidence to distinguished. And we wanted to make sure that we also point out to you that the target level for our teacher candidates is really this proficient area. We often talk about it in this way. We certainly know that you're still students, you're still in that learning phase. So certainly a teacher candidate from time to time may visit this distinguished area, but typically they're not going to live there. They're going to be proficient, emerging, even foundational. Those are not uncommon scores to receive. So please don't be alarmed if you aren't scoring in that distinguished area for all the standards. Just remember that this is a part of the learning process. Most of you, this is going to be your first time really in that full takeover experience. And just remember to be open to feedback and to take on that spirit of continuous improvement. Here at the bottom, we posted a quote that we often use with our teacher candidates. The life of the teacher begins the day you realize that you are always a learner. So please know that oftentimes, even if you're an A student, your scores for this student teaching experience may look a little bit different because this is a whole different type of course than most of you are used to. And we want to see room for growth. So most of you will be working with a face-to-face faculty supervisor. We have faculty supervisors all over the United States. So we do, in most cases, get someone in person to come in and observe you. However, depending on the region, some of you may be working on a virtual supervisor. The virtual supervisor has the exact same expectations as a regular face-to-face supervisor. They'll just be observing your teaching performance and completing the pre and post evaluations virtually. So that can happen via Skype, FaceTime, video recording. Our virtual supervisors are very well versed in technology, so they'll be able to help you out there. And you'll know what type of supervisor you have as soon as we receive the supervisor contact information. If there are areas within your observations where we see you may need some additional support, you may be placed on what we call a professional growth plan, or a PGP. I want you to know that these do not impact your student record or your ability to graduate. These are really just an additional support put into place to make sure that you're successful through your experience. So they're not punitive, they don't impact your course grade, but they're designed to provide you with additional support. So if your supervisor comes to you and says, you know what, let's put you on a professional growth plan, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just an additional support to make sure that you're able to get through this experience successfully. If you do happen to have an unsuccessful attempt at student teaching, we've indicated the following actions that may occur. These are also listed in the Student Teaching Handbook as well as the University Policy Handbook. Just to note that student teaching can only be repeated one time. So if you have an unsuccessful attempt, you'll only have one additional opportunity to complete student teaching. Okay, so on the next several pages are some helpful tips to consider during your student teaching experience. Here again, you'll see some additional tips on feedback specifically. So again, it is very critical to your success to be open to feedback and accept it as a roadmap to success rather than a criticism. Again, for the sake of time, we won't read through all of these in detail, but please do come back particularly to this feedback area and read through at your convenience. You know, the cooperating teachers and the GCU faculty supervisors, their job is to support you through this experience, and they will come to you with feedback. Sometimes it can certainly be a little bit difficult to hear that things might not be going as well as maybe you thought, but they're really there just to make sure that you are the best teacher that you can be. So be as open to that feedback as you can. And then again, here on the next several pages, we'll cover helpful reminders and tips regarding lesson planning. Again, for the sake of time, we're not going to read through these, but these are just several pages on different lesson planning aspects that will help you throughout the experience. You'll get access to this link and you can click through it at any time. So we have helpful strategies here, components of a lesson, how to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, the different parts of a lesson plan. Reflection and how to go back and reflect on how a lesson went and then how to improve it moving forward. Questions to ask yourself when lesson planning. And then we get into classroom management and engagement techniques. Classroom management is usually an area where student teachers do struggle a little bit. You know, you're going into a brand new classroom with new students. Sometimes that can be a little bit challenging. However, the good news is that during this upcoming student teaching experience, you'll get to see that classroom teacher set up his or her management systems and go through their procedures within their classroom, and you'll be able to learn really well from them. So again, for the sake of time, we're not going to read through each of these, but note here we have some information regarding the rules and the procedures, classroom culture, and how to build a positive environment, tips for the first week of school, tips on attention and engagement, preparedness, and then, of course, just more and more resources and additional tips for you. Right now, I also wanted to point out to you the Professional Learning Network. You know that you'll have a lot of resources available to you within that Student Success Center. Our student teachers also get access to our Professional Learning Network. You've all should have been assigned as a member, so you should have access now as well. Well, let me see if I can sign in here. This is what the Professional Learning Network will look like. So you will have to sign in. And again, this is just a spot for our student teachers and more resources, an area to collaborate. You'll see all the different tabs here at the top. There'll be resources, education news, different calendar events or webinars that we may hold. There's links down the left-hand side. Go into group spaces here. Here are the different group spaces. You will all be assigned into the teacher candidate group space. This is also where you can access a link to the orientation that we're going through and other tips, and a link here again to our Student Success Center. Going back to the different group spaces, I wanted to also point out EdTPA. Only certain states will require this additional component of EdTPA. Those are students in New York, Georgia, or Wisconsin. You will have this additional EdTPA component that you'll be learning more about if you have not already heard about it. Just know that there is an additional group space for you with additional resources. Another great way to navigate through the Professional Learning Network is also to come up here to the right-hand corner, and there's a search bar. So you can really type in anything here if you're looking for a specific resource, and then that will pop up. So again, you'll all be getting access to the Professional Learning Network, and you'll be able to click into this additional resource space at any time during student teaching. We do have what we call the Exemplary Teacher Candidate Award. There is an application process where you're asked to submit letters of references and a videotape of your teaching performance. Once that application has been submitted to the college, we'll review it and we will choose, we usually have a handful of winners each semester, and you're awarded with a nice certificate and usually a prize for your classroom as well. So that's an optional award, but we certainly encourage all of our teacher candidates to apply so we can honor you for being an exemplary teacher candidate. Another thing we wanted to make sure that we highlighted and make sure you're all aware of is our College of Education Promise. The Promise is a unique feature to our GCU College of Education students, and this is really our guarantee to you. So what the Promise is, it's anyone that graduates from GCU and goes out there and they're in their first year of teaching. If you're struggling in any type of way, if you're struggling with classroom management or lesson planning, you can reach out to GCU and we will help you free of charge. So it's really just a simple process. If you want to contact us because you're in that first year of teaching and you're having some difficulty, all you need to do is email coepromise@gcu.edu, and we will provide you with appropriate assistance as needed at no charge. And then last but not least, you'll see here on the last page of this training module a link to complete the training verification. So you'll see that here. Now you won't be able to click on it right now because this is just in presentation mode. But whenever you're able to access this training module link yourself, you'll be able to go to the last page. You'll click on this link, and then you'll just complete the form, and that will just really indicate that you've completed the orientation. So again, don't click on your screen because it won't work now, but you'll be able to as soon as you have the link to the actual module. So that was it for what I wanted to cover. I know that was a lot of information very quickly. I thank you for all listening, and I wanted to make sure we had at least a few minutes here to answer any of your questions. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to hang on the line. You can raise your virtual hand or type the question in the question box, and I will do my best to answer you as quickly as possible. If you don't have any additional questions, feel free to drop off the call. I thank you very much for joining today's orientation. I wish you luck in the upcoming semester, and please know that we are here to support you. If you have any questions, please do reach out to your counselors, utilize your GCU faculty supervisors. I'm sure you're all going to do just great. Okay, I see a hand up. Tori, do you have a question? I will go ahead and unmute you if you have a question.
Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
I'm looking for, where can I find an example of digital portfolio?
Yes, that's a great question. We do have a portfolio resource on our Student Success Center. It won't be an example, but it will give you an example of a couple of different websites that are free that you could create your portfolio on. So there's websites like Weebly is one of them. I know I've used that personally, but you'll be able to, and your instructor in the class may have a few examples that previous students have submitted. They might be able to provide you. But you'll be instructed in your course exactly what assignments or what projects to put into that portfolio.
Okay, that's great. That's what I am looking for.
Yeah, and it's a great thing to utilize, for potential job interviews. Having it digitally is nice, so you're not having to, waste paper or print out things or give someone a big binder. We used to do that back whenever I student taught. We actually collected everything in a paper binder, but nowadays everyone likes everything digitally. So we just want to make sure that you're prepared and have a nice introduction to yourself and the work that you've completed that you're able to provide to potential employers.
Okay, sounds great.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I do see a hand. Harley? Harley, did you have a question? Harley, it looks like you are self-muted, so if you unmute yourself, if you have a question, I can certainly try to help out.
Sorry, I don't have a question.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Harley. Okay, here's a great question. What sort of contact does GCU have with our cooperating teachers regarding their responsibilities? My teachers seem to be very unaware of what part they will play in my student teaching semester. Yes, we do have their responsibilities covered in the student teaching manual. However, we have a specific training for them. So we do have, we have 4 employees here. There are clinical field experience specialists that work specifically with the cooperating teachers. And they're divided by region of the United States. So if you, or if your cooperating teacher has a question, please feel free to reach out to your teacher placement counselor and we can get in contact with the appropriate field experience specialist for your cooperating teacher and make sure they have all the information they need. Here's a question. How will I find out if my GCU faculty supervisor will be in person or not? So you all will be forwarded your contact information from your supervisor. Typically, I believe that should indicate if they're a virtual supervisor versus an in-person. But as soon as you get their contact information, just call them, introduce yourself, and they will also explain to you the process, whether they'll be in-person or virtual. The majority of our students do get an in-person supervisor. Sometimes, and it's typically more in the rural regions of the U.S., we try our best to get a faculty member out there in that region to supervise. However, sometimes it's just not possible, and that's typically whenever someone would have a virtual supervisor. Okay. Don't see any additional questions in the question box, but if you have any additional questions, I will certainly hang on the line for the next 5 minutes here. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And I will again be sending out a recorded version of this presentation, as well as a link to the module to each one of the attendees today. Okay, here's a great question. My classroom is a co-teaching experience. How will this change my takeover time and evaluation? So co-teaching is a different model, and we understand that co-teaching, you typically are still in oftentimes that full takeover mode. So it might look a little bit different, but if you have any questions, just work with your GSU faculty supervisor, and they can kind of help get you through that. They're very well versed on the expectations and the different types of models each of our students will go into. Every district, every school site has their own uniqueness to it. So each student's experience is going to look a little bit different, but your GCU faculty supervisor will help you guide you through that. You do want to remember one thing about our programs. We have approvals through our state Department of Education, and one thing we really are pretty strict on are the days. We want to make sure that you're fulfilling that 70 or 75-day requirement. So it's really important upfront to plan out those days and just make sure you're keeping on track. And it is okay to have to continue to fulfill those days even after your online course ends. Sometimes that happens a lot in the spring, a lot more in the spring because schools have spring breaks and just different holidays that come up. So our course instructors are very well aware that you may need an incomplete grade until you've made up your days. Okay, I don't see any other questions at this time. I think we can go ahead and end the webinar, but I'm sure once you review this information, more questions may pop up. So please feel free again to utilize your resources here at GCU. Reach out to your counselors, review the handbooks, the additional resources on the Student Success Center and the Professional Learning Network. Again, I wish you all the best of luck through this experience. It will seem like it's taking a long time as you're going through it, but as soon as it's done, I promise you it will seem like it flew by in just a split second, and then you'll be off and on to your own classrooms. So again, I very much appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy schedules to join me today, and I wish you luck in the spring. Thanks so much.